The restaurant buzzed with quiet elegance, soft music playing in the background, silver cutlery clinking against fine china. Bruce Lee and his wife walked in, instantly drawing a few curious glances, not just because of Bruce's fame, but because of the aura he carried. Calm, confident, and almost magnetic. He didn't need to say a word to command attention. As they were seated at a prime table near the window, everything seemed perfectly normal. The staff greeted them politely, and the couple began to relax, enjoying a quiet evening together. But then, it happened. A waiter, young and seemingly careless, approached their table. Something in his tone hinted at arrogance, maybe even a sense of superiority. And before Bruce could even register what was coming, the waiter made an offhand comment about Bruce's wife. It wasn't just rude, it was insulting. A subtle jab, but one sharp enough to pierce the calm atmosphere of the restaurant. Instantly the air changed. The few nearby diners froze mid-bite, sensing the tension spike. The waiter, oblivious to the room's sudden silence, continued with a smirk, assuming his words were harmless or maybe even clever. But he had miscalculated. Massively. Bruce Lee, known around the world for his unparalleled martial arts skills and legendary discipline, didn't react immediately. There was no shout, no anger flaring in his eyes. Just a slight pause, a moment so brief yet so powerful that it felt like time itself slowed down. Every bystander, from the couple in the corner booth to the chef in the kitchen, felt it. Something monumental was about to happen. The waiter finally noticed Bruce's silence and expected a reaction, maybe a confrontation, maybe a loud reprimand. What he didn't know was that Bruce's calm was not weakness. It was a storm waiting to strike, a perfect storm crafted from years of discipline, presence, and an unshakable sense of respect for dignity. And then, in the next few seconds, Bruce would make a choice that would shock everyone in the room, and leave the waiter questioning every decision that had led to this moment. Everyone thought Bruce would explode. But what he did next shocked the room forever. The room held its breath. Bruce Lee still sat, his eyes calmly focused on the table, his wife glancing at him nervously, unsure if she should speak or step back. Around them, diners whispered quietly, their curiosity and shock mixing with fear. The waiter, now realizing he had crossed an invisible line, shifted uncomfortably, glancing at Bruce's calm demeanor and sensing that something was very wrong. For him, it was the silence that made the moment electric. Not a single word had been exchanged since the insult, yet the energy in the room was palpable. Every diner, every staff member, every pair of eyes in that restaurant seemed to fixate on Bruce Lee. Even the soft background music felt louder against the tension. People leaned forward slightly in their chairs, almost unconsciously, trying to anticipate what he might do next. For Bruce, those seconds were not wasted. He wasn't angry. He was observing. Watching the waiter squirm, the subtle changes in body language, the growing realization of his mistake. He could feel the tension radiating from his wife, who kept glancing nervously at the staff, silently urging him to say something, to defend her. But Bruce's calm was deliberate. It was powerful. It was a statement in itself. Around the restaurant, whispers began to spread. Is that Bruce Lee? A couple at a nearby table exchanged glances, unsure if they were imagining it. The waiter's arrogance was fading, replaced by doubt. Every second he delayed, every heartbeat, only made the presence of Bruce Lee more overwhelming. The magic of the moment wasn't in words, it was in anticipation. Everyone in that room, whether they knew who Bruce Lee was or not, could feel the storm building silently. People instinctively reached for their phones, some to record, some just to capture what they knew would become legendary. You could almost hear the collective thought in their minds, he's about to do something extraordinary. And this is where you watching right now become part of the story. Imagine being in that restaurant. Imagine the air thick with tension, every eye on Bruce Lee, and the waiter realizing that his arrogance might cost him more than just embarrassment. If you were here, would you try to stop the waiter or just watch? And tell me, what country or city are you watching this from right now? Comment below. Bruce didn't speak. He didn't move. He didn't raise a finger. He simply allowed the tension to simmer, letting the waiter fully understand the weight of his disrespect. The pause lasted for what felt like an eternity, but in reality, it was only 5 seconds. 5 seconds that would define the rest of the evening. Every diner, every employee, and every silent observer could feel the moment building towards something unforgettable. That 5-second pause wasn't hesitation, it was a deliberate, controlled, unspoken message. Respect is earned, and disrespect will never go unnoticed. And just as the waiter's smirk faltered, and his confidence wavered, Bruce prepared to respond. But the question remained, how would he do it? Would it be words, a gesture, or something that left the entire restaurant stunned? Wait until you see Bruce's 5-second reaction in part 3. It's brief, but it shocked everyone in that room forever. The silence in the restaurant was deafening. Every fork frozen mid-air, every whispered conversation halted, every glance fixed on Bruce Lee. The waiter's smirk had disappeared completely, replaced by a twitch of uncertainty. He thought a casual insult would go unnoticed. He had no idea who he was dealing with. Bruce didn't flinch. He didn't move a muscle at first. He simply sat there, calm, composed, eyes locked on the waiter. For most people, 5 seconds seems like a blink. But in that moment, those 5 seconds stretched into eternity. It was as if the room itself had slowed down, everyone holding their breath, waiting for the storm they all knew was coming. The waiter shifted nervously, trying to break the silence, to say something clever, to regain control. But Bruce didn't give him the satisfaction. Those 5 seconds weren't empty, they were heavy with intention. Every inch of Bruce's posture, every subtle movement of his eyes, every barely perceptible tightening of his jaw communicated a message that didn't need words. You have made a mistake, and it will not go unaddressed. The tension was so thick that diners could almost taste it. Some gripped the edges of their chairs. Some whispered to each other, "I've never seen someone hold themselves like that." Even Bruce's wife, who had initially looked nervous, now felt a surge of awe. She knew that whatever Bruce was about to do, it would leave an impression that no one in the room would ever forget. And then, in a movement so subtle that some people didn't even notice it at first, Bruce leaned slightly forward. His voice broke the silence, calm, controlled, but sharp as a blade. Just a single sentence. Not a yell. Not an explosion of anger. Just words that carried the full weight of authority, intelligence, and presence. Respect her, or you will learn respect the hard way. That was it. 5 seconds of silence, one perfectly chosen sentence, and the entire dynamic of the room shifted instantly. The waiter froze mid-step, his face draining of color. He could feel every eye on him, and for the first time, he realized that arrogance and ignorance were powerless against discipline and presence. The diners exhaled slowly, almost in unison, as the tension melted into astonishment. Murmurs ran through the room. Did he just... That's Bruce Lee. The realization hit like a wave. This was no ordinary man. This was someone whose calm command could silence arrogance with a single word. Bruce's eyes softened slightly as he looked at his wife, giving her a subtle nod of reassurance. He didn't need to shout or strike. The room itself had acknowledged the lesson. Respect had been earned, and humiliation had quietly settled over the waiter without a single act of physical aggression. And yet, even as the crowd whispered and the waiter trembled, there was an unspoken understanding. This wasn't just about a restaurant insult. This was a masterclass in presence, discipline, and the quiet, unstoppable power of a calm mind. If you were in that restaurant, would you have the courage to stay calm like Bruce? Or would you react instantly? Type calm or react in the comments below. The tension hadn't just been released, it had transformed. Everyone in the restaurant now knew they were witnessing something extraordinary. That 5-second pause, that single sentence, had done more than silence a rude waiter. It had created a moment that would be remembered forever, a lesson in dignity, strength, and the power of presence. When whispers spread through the restaurant and everyone realizes who Bruce Lee really is, the moment gets even more intense. The restaurant, once quiet and elegant, now buzzed with a tension that felt electric. Bruce Lee's calm reaction had done more than silence the rude waiter, it had completely shifted the energy in the room. Every diner, from the couple in the corner booth to the chef behind the kitchen counter, felt it. Something extraordinary had just happened. As Bruce leaned back slightly, composed, the whispers began. At first, they were just soft murmurs, barely audible over the clinking of cutlery. Did he say that? Who is he? The waiter, now pale and jittery, looked around, realizing that his arrogance had backfired spectacularly. He had thought an insult would pass unnoticed, a small jab that wouldn't matter. But the air itself seemed to recognize Bruce's presence, and then someone finally said it out loud. A young diner, his voice trembling with excitement, whispered, That's Bruce Lee." The word spread like wildfire. At the next table, a couple exchanged wide-eyed glances. "Bruce Lee? The Bruce Lee?" Whispers grew louder, spreading from table to table. Some diners pulled out their phones, discreetly recording, not wanting to miss this once-in-a-lifetime moment. Others leaned closer, craning their necks, trying to catch every movement, every subtle gesture. The waiter's nervousness escalated. Each whisper seemed to shrink him further, each recognition of Bruce Lee's identity weighing heavier. He had gone from arrogance to fear in mere seconds. The room, once tense with uncertainty, now buzzed with awe and admiration. People couldn't stop staring. The once invisible aura of Bruce Lee had suddenly become impossible to ignore. Bruce's wife, sitting beside him, finally relaxed slightly. She looked at her husband with admiration, knowing the room was witnessing a master at work, not a fight, not an argument, but the silent, magnetic power of presence. Bruce didn't need to raise his voice. He didn't need to gesture. His calm confidence said it all, and now everyone understood the weight of it. Meanwhile, the waiter tried to collect himself. He forced a smile, attempting to salvage some dignity, but it was too late. The whispers had already done their work. The crowd had mentally taken sides. Bruce Lee wasn't just a calm man in the room. He was a legend. And the waiter? He was a mere mortal, now fully aware of his mistake. The restaurant staff exchanged nervous glances, realizing that they were in the presence of someone who transcended ordinary rules. Even the manager approached cautiously, unsure whether to intervene, but aware that Bruce's aura demanded respect. There was no arguing, no confrontation needed. The room itself had acknowledged the shift, and as the whispers grew louder, the lesson became clear to everyone: disrespect, arrogance, and ignorance can be met with calm authority, but only a few possess the presence to command it without raising a hand. Bruce Lee had just demonstrated that mastery wasn't just about martial arts, it was about control, awareness, and the unspoken power of silence. If you were in that restaurant and realized it was Bruce Lee, what would you have done? Watch quietly, record, or approach him? Comment below. By now, the tension had evolved into pure awe. Diners weren't just observing an interaction, they were witnessing history in the making. Bruce Lee had transformed a potential confrontation into a moment of reverence, proving that true strength is measured not in anger or violence, but in presence, control, and unwavering composure. When the waiter finally realizes the full extent of his mistake, and Bruce's calm authority changes everything in the room. The room had transformed completely. What had begun as an ordinary dinner had become a stage for a lesson in respect and presence. Every diner was now acutely aware of the legend. Sitting quietly at one table, Bruce Lee. Whispers continued to ripple through the restaurant, but the tension had deepened. The waiter, pale and visibly shaken, realized he was facing more than a polite patron. He was facing a master. His earlier arrogance, the careless insult, seemed almost absurd now. The smirk that had once lingered on his face was gone, replaced by a nervous twitch and a growing awareness of how badly he had misjudged the situation. Sweat beaded on his forehead as he fumbled with the menu, trying to regain some sense of control, but there was none to be had. The crowd, now silently observing, had shifted its attention entirely. Every eye was on Bruce Lee, waiting to see what he would do next. Bruce, still calm, didn't raise his voice or make any sudden movements. But the authority radiating from him was undeniable. His gaze, steady and unwavering, locked onto the waiter in a way that communicated power without aggression. The room seemed to shrink around them, as if Bruce's presence alone had become a force field of control. Finally, the waiter spoke, stammering, I'm sorry, sir. I didn't mean any harm." His words were weak, almost pleading, but Bruce's response didn't come immediately. He let the silence stretch for a few more seconds, each second amplifying the weight of the lesson. Diners leaned forward in their chairs, sensing that something monumental was unfolding. Then, Bruce spoke, not with anger, not with shouting, but with a calm, commanding authority that carried across the entire room. Respect is not given because you think you deserve it. Respect is earned every single day. Words have weight and actions have consequences. Learn this and you will never falter again. The waiter froze completely, the words sinking into him like a stone dropped into deep water. The room held its collective breath as the gravity of Bruce's lesson settled in. It was more than an apology. It was a masterclass in humility, composure, and authority. Every diner, from the front to the back of the restaurant, felt it in their bones. This wasn't just an encounter. It was a moment of education, one that would be remembered forever. Bruce's wife, sitting beside him, looked on with pride and relief. She knew her husband could have reacted with anger or force, but instead, he had chosen a path that demonstrated true mastery. The room, once tense, now vibrated with awe. Even the restaurant staff, who had seen countless famous patrons, seemed stunned into silence. The waiter, finally understanding the full weight of the situation, dropped his eyes, muttering a sincere apology. Bruce's calm, unwavering presence had turned a moment of disrespect into a lesson in personal power. The shift in the room was palpable. The crowd was no longer spectators of an insult, but witnesses to an unparalleled display of discipline and presence. If you were the waiter, would you have had the courage to apologize like that, or would you have tried to walk away? Comment apologize or walk in the comments below. This was more than a confrontation. It was a demonstration that true strength lies not in anger or aggression, but in composure, respect, and awareness. Bruce Lee had taken a potentially humiliating incident and transformed it into a story of awe-inspiring mastery. When the lesson spreads through the restaurant and everyone truly sees Bruce Lee for who he is, the moment of admiration gets even more intense. The atmosphere in the restaurant had completely transformed. What had started as a casual evening now felt like witnessing a masterclass in respect, discipline, and presence. Bruce Lee's calm, Commanding reaction to the insult had not only silenced the waiter, but had captured the attention of everyone in the room. Diners were no longer eating or chatting. They were watching history unfold. Whispers grew louder, moving from table to table. "That's Bruce Lee." "The Bruce Lee? Did you see how calm he is?" People pulled out their phones, not to record the argument, but to capture the presence of a living legend. Every subtle gesture of Bruce's, the way he held himself, the slight tilt of his head, the quiet intensity in his eyes was being noticed and admired. The waiter, once brimming with arrogance, now looked completely undone. His earlier smirk had vanished, replaced by wide eyes, shallow breaths, and trembling hands. He realized that this was no ordinary customer. This was Bruce Lee, the very embodiment of discipline, mastery, and unspoken authority. Every fiber of his being communicated respect, and in comparison, the waiter felt utterly exposed. Restaurant staff, previously anxious about handling a difficult patron, now seemed frozen, captivated by Bruce's presence. Even the manager, who had initially considered stepping in to control the situation, instinctively understood that intervention was unnecessary. Bruce had already restored order not through force, but through sheer composure and the undeniable power of presence. Bruce's wife, sitting beside him, finally relaxed. Her initial worry had transformed into pride as she watched her husband demonstrate a level of mastery that went far beyond martial arts. This was a display of mental strength, patience, and the ability to command respect without uttering a single harsh word. She whispered quietly to herself, "This is why he's the legend." Meanwhile, the whispers continued to ripple through the room. Diners at nearby tables had started offering polite nods of admiration, while others whispered encouragement toward the shaken waiter. "Apologize properly. Show respect." The waiter now fully understood the weight of his actions and attempted to compose himself. His voice, small and shaky, finally emerged. I'm truly sorry. I didn't mean to disrespect anyone. I understand now." Bruce gave a subtle nod of acknowledgement, short, firm, and calm. No anger, no triumph. Just recognition that the lesson had been learned. The entire restaurant seemed to exhale collectively, as though the tension that had gripped the room for the last several minutes had finally lifted. The scene became more than a confrontation. It was a lesson in humility and composure. Every diner, every staff member, and even the waiter had learned something invaluable. True strength lies not in aggression, not in loud words, but in presence, calm confidence, and awareness. Bruce had turned an insulting comment into a moment of education, leaving everyone in awe. Have you ever been in a situation where someone stayed calm and completely owned the room? Share your story in the comments below wherever you're watching from. As Bruce sipped his drink quietly, the restaurant slowly returned to its normal rhythm, but the energy had irrevocably shifted. The lesson lingered in the air. Arrogance and disrespect crumble in the face of calm authority. And true mastery doesn't need to shout it, simply commands attention. By the end of the evening, the incident had transformed from a potential disaster into a story that everyone would recount for years to come. It was no longer just about a waiter or a rude comment. It was about dignity, discipline, and the quiet, unstoppable power of presence. The story spreads beyond the restaurant. Millions online witness Bruce Lee's legendary response, and the lesson goes viral. You won't believe the worldwide reaction. The night had ended, but the story was far from over. What had started as a tense dinner in a quiet restaurant had now exploded beyond the walls of that room. Phones in the hands of diners had captured Bruce Lee's legendary calm, his single sentence of authority, and the stunned reaction of the waiter. Within hours, clips were shared online, spreading like wildfire across social media platforms. Millions of people around the world watched the videos. captivated not by a fight or confrontation, but by the raw power of composure and presence. Comments flooded in. Unbelievable. He didn't even raise his voice. That is what true strength looks like. I wish I could handle disrespect like Bruce Lee. People from every corner of the globe, New York, London, Manila, Tokyo, Rio, were witnessing the lesson firsthand. And the admiration was universal. News outlets picked up the story. Headlines read things like, Bruce Lee silences rude waiter with 5 seconds of pure presence and legendary calm. How Bruce Lee turned insult into masterclass in respect. The story became more than just a viral moment. It became a worldwide example of how dignity and composure can command respect more powerfully than anger or aggression ever could. The waiter, who had caused the initial tension, was now facing the reality of his mistake on a global scale. Yet Bruce Lee's response wasn't about shaming him, it was about teaching a lesson that could reach millions. In fact, the young waiter later admitted in interviews that the incident had completely changed the way he viewed respect, discipline, and human interaction. One moment in a restaurant had transformed a lifetime of understanding. For Bruce, there was no need to bask in the attention. He remained humble, using the incident to inspire rather than boast. Fans and viewers marveled at how effortlessly he turned a potentially volatile moment into a lesson in presence and self-control. The story became a touchstone for anyone dealing with disrespect, proving that true power lies in calm, deliberate action. If you believe strength isn't about yelling or fighting, but staying calm under pressure, type legend in the comments. And tell us, where are you watching this from? Soon, the story began inspiring a wave of challenges, online videos showing people handling rude or difficult situations calmly, citing Bruce Lee's legendary 5-second reaction. Teachers, parents, and professionals shared the clip, using it as an example of how to command respect without aggression. It wasn't just entertainment. It was a life lesson being applied worldwide. And as the story reached millions, one truth became clear. What happened in that restaurant would never be forgotten. A simple insult had become a global moment of awe, teaching viewers everywhere that patience, awareness, and quiet authority can have far more impact than anger or force. Bruce Lee's reaction had not only humiliated no one unnecessarily, but it had educated millions, showing the world the power of calm mastery. Finally, the legend of that moment became part of Bruce Lee's timeless legacy. It wasn't a fight that people remembered. It was the lesson in dignity, discipline, and presence. And it left viewers with a challenge of their own. How would they handle disrespect in their own lives? If you believe no one should be judged or disrespected, type respect in the comments, subscribe, and share this story with someone who needs to see how calm confidence can change everything.